to the cloud. And got 9 participants. Good. All right. Well, get started. The last time, excuse me, we were here, we were talking about China and Emperor Qin's terracotta warriors and a bunch of other things. About China, I ran across this a year or so ago, and I thought it was really pretty good, partly because it brings in a bunch of the same ideas, some of the same ideas we've been talking about all semester. And so this is the Forbidden City. This is History Magazine. It's part of National Geographic, and it's legit. And what I wanted to point out first here, Call of Supreme Harmony. And so this Forbidden City is now really pretty much a tourist attraction, but for 500 years, it was the royal palace of China. And it's not like, it's like a lot of things we've seen in here. It's not haphazard. And in fact, almost everything about it has some kind of significance in terms of meaning. And so it says here that the entire complex is full of palaces, gardens, courtyards, and living quarters. And of course, because in the Forbidden City, they would have not only the royal family, but they would have all of the attendants and other kinds of high officials from the government and so on. And so, as it says here, was built between 1420. Oh, excuse me. Never mind. It was 1420 was when it was built, and this is one of the points I wanted to make. We've talked about this as an idea at a number of points, sacred geometry. And certainly the Greeks, they basically invented geometry as we know it here in the West, but it was a mathematical principle. It was a mathematical discipline in a lot of other places around the world. And Raylan and I were talking a while back about the medieval lute and the sound hole, and it has this floral, symmetrical, ideal pattern that looked a lot like another place where we saw sacred geometry was in rose windows of Gothic cathedrals. And sacred geometry exists all over in Egypt, and people are still amazed at the geometry of, say, like the pyramids at Giza. And I know 2 of you guys are doing presentations on that, and you'll run across that too, about the perfect pyramid shape. And so anyway, this is another principle that comes out of this. Layout follows the principle of feng shui, the art of placing objects and buildings to promote positive energy. As I said, it was not haphazard. It is all for a purpose. And this is kind of an interesting point here too. It says that its design famously incorporates 9,999 and 1/2 rooms. Only the celestial Lord of Heaven, not his imperial son on earth, could enjoy 10,000. Anyway, it's an auspicious number, 9 999. And so it's pronounced the same as the Chinese word eternal. So all of these things kind of all come together. What's the point here? The point is that there are a lot of similarities from ancient cultures, from one culture to the next. We can talk about the Parthenon on the Acropolis and the geometry used to design and build the Parthenon is fantastic. We didn't even know how precise this was until modern times, when we had modern measuring tools. They could shoot a laser that'll be straight and see exactly that things that appear to be straight are not. And so it's all in order. And it is on a central axis that bisects the grounds. Did I just use the word symmetry? Exactly. That's a religious, philosophical, it's a symbol, it's a belief. And so anyway, here is the third ruler of the Ming Dynasty, and moved the Chinese capital from Nanjing to Beijing. And so anyway, like I said, the emperor was the only official inhabitant, and ministers and nobles who represented people were mere visitors. But they had rooms, they could stay there, and but at any rate, and I like this too, this bronze incense burner. Last Wednesday, I showed you the Temple of the Seven Banyan Trees in Guangzhou, China, the one that I was telling you, I went up to the top. They had these giant incense burners on the grounds. And they were lit during celebrations in the courtyard, but at Guangzhou, they were really pretty much lit all of the time. And it says what it is today. The last Chinese emperor, Hu Yi, lived in the Forbidden City until 1924. Have any of you ever seen the film The Last Emperor?
Once.
Well, you did, Blake. What'd you think of it?
I don't like, my memory of it is extremely vague because like I watched it like almost 10 years ago, and it was like I was with my parents. It was, chilling, watching a movie with my parents at night. Just I don't remember much of it.
Ah, okay. Well, let me tell you about it, because it was like won the best picture of the year at the Academy Awards. It was extremely well done, and it's about the life of the Emperor Hu Yi, and in fact, he called himself Henry Hu Yi, and it's about his life. And he was born pretty much at the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th century, and it shows pretty much the evolution of China from a culture that still was very steeped in ancient ways to the time it goes up to the 1960s, modern China, Mao, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really well done. It's very accurate, very informative. I'd recommend it if you got about 3 hours to want to learn about this.
I do recognize the Forbidden City though, because it does match the description of what little I can remember of the movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, and this Forbidden City is surrounded by a wall, because it is a fortress and it would be defended in case of invaders or attackers. And you see these things here. Let me see if I can let me zoom in. It's not let me do that. But see those little gaps in the top of the wall? That's called crenellation, you say. It's interesting because this is how fortresses have been built all over the world. And there's a walkway just under that, and your soldiers can move all around the perimeter of this wall, and they can shoot their arrows or whatever from these gaps. So it provides protection, crenellation. And so a lot of wonderful photos. And as you can see, this is all modern bicycle racks and gates and things. It won't let me zoom in. These here, if anybody been to China? You should go if you can. This right here, these little shelters, these are bike racks, because people in China, the big cities, and there are many, they ride bikes, and this is like a parking lot. It's like a bicycle parking lot. It has a tin roof, and you pull your bike in, and it's kind of like checking your kind of like getting a locker at the gym or something, give you a little token, carry it around. Anyway, and more wonderful pictures. And harmony, that feng shui idea, what I've been talking about. So everything has a purpose. And another thing that I think is important, dragons are very prominent in Chinese culture and in Chinese history. But we've seen that in the Middle East. We've seen that in Europe. We've seen that with St. George slaying the dragon. It's kind of interesting. Nobody has ever found the skeletal remains or fossils of a dragon. So this, at least by what we know today, a dragon is a mythical creature. But in the belief system, very real. And something else we've seen a lot too. We've seen this in Islamic holy places, important places where proverbs or sayings or quotations are put right on the wall. And if you take a close look at this, there's not really a lot of depictions of people here. And so similarities, global. And so this is what it looks like at night. And so that is China's Forbidden City. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Here we are. Got to make sure we're sharing the right thing. Very good. And so, a lot of their paintings. I kind of really like this one. Yuan Liben, Emperor Swan, and the attendants. And this is like real typical Chinese. This is a hand scroll, and a lot of their hand painted paintings are typically done with ink, some color, and you roll them out. And typically there's a poem or a proverb or some other quote describing what's going on here. And this has, to me, a lot of deep meaning, because I have been one that I like to think about the relationship between words and images. And they've done this beautifully. And this is like pretty much a hallmark of Chinese and Japanese painting. And one of the things that they do here too, and this is kind of predates what happens in the West, but oftentimes, instead of trying to describe, say, like the form of the emperor here, they're not averse to just doing this in a flat black area. There's not that much modeling going on, and to some extent that's just okay. You can see some large paintings here, Tomb of the Princess. And Tang Dynasty, 1 foot 8 inches high, so it's like 20 inches high. Glazed earthenware. As we saw with the Greeks, and we've seen with a number of cultures, the idea of making art from terracotta has been something that's existed for many, many years. Earthenware is kind of like terracotta. It's basically clay, but it's not the red clay that. But anyway, it's ceramics. It's glazed. It's baked. It's painted, and we saw that with the terracotta warriors as well. And probably the terracotta warriors originally looked probably a lot more like this. Li Qing, a solitary temple amid clearing peaks, and what they mean by that is that the fog is lifting here. But there's the temple. And this is uniquely Chinese. It's ink on silk. And if you've been to China, especially southern China, the first thing that I noticed is that I always thought that these kind of mountains were just created fantastic. They actually have a landscape where mountains that look like this actually exist. And so anyway, the ideas of harmony and peace and Fan Quan, travelers among the mountains and streams. And down here, zoom in. There they are, right there. again, on silk, ink and color, writing, words, image. Their pottery becomes very exquisite. It's one of the things that that they get really, really good at, and this kind of decoration, this kind of glazing, just incredible. And in fact, if I could editorialize a little bit, China was kind of well, it was far away from Europe, but in the 18th century, Europeans really started coming over in large numbers, and they started occupying various parts of China. Probably the most famous was Hong Kong. That was occupied and part of the British Empire. But what happened was that these foreigners came in and they really looted China. All of this exquisite pottery and art and spices, and anyway. Here we go. As I speak, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, Kansas City. That's why I say they pretty much came in and hauled away a lot of stuff. That was in the 19th, early 20th centuries. Bodhisattva, Guanyin. And again, like I said before, can't say it enough, Buddhism thrives in China. And so you can see the Hindu influence here. You can see the Chinese influence. And again, this is where I was at with the pagoda, the Temple of the Seven Banyan Trees. I showed you that. Again, ink, very delicate. And one of the things that happens in Chinese art is that they really start to think more about atmosphere than anything we've seen so far. See how this all fades out? The mountains, they fade out into nothingness. We haven't quite seen any of that before. And I'll go back to like this. It says amid clearing peaks. And so the fog is lifting here, but there are places here that are not fully described. The idea of atmosphere becomes something that the Chinese artists are actually quite comfortable with. We don't see that really so much in other parts of the world, at least at this time. Again, sky, Proverbs. Another thing, their artists often depict subjects that are not particularly royal, are not particularly military, they're not particularly religious. Now these guys here, Lohan's giving alms to the beggars, and they're the beggars, and alms means they are donating, they're giving them money. And in the old days, even in European terms, they'd say alms for the poor, which means give them some money. They're broke, they're destitute. But this is not like a triumphal battle scene. This is kind of ordinary as well. 12 views from a thatched hut. And there you go. Mountain path in spring. Not royal, particularly not military triumphant, godlike worshiping images. And so, crowned from the north mount of Cheon Man Chong tomb, and this is from Korea. Would like to kind of point out something here. If you look carefully, you can see sort of a swastika in this chair too. Could be, may not be, but bottom line, Korea as an extension of China, as really almost for a long time was considered to be another province of China. And again, from Korea, another bodhisattva. Buddhism, bronze. And so, with that, I wanted to kind of finish up. Come on. Finish up China. And I got something here. I was going to take a little break from talking about this stuff and ask you guys how you doing with the PowerPoint presentations.
Haven't started it yet.
Oh, well, you're an honest man. I like that. Well, I have this. Today is the 15th, 14th. Yes, that's right. And this being due in 7 days. Is that going to be enough time? I wanted to get it due as soon as possible, and partly because I didn't want you to have to be working on this over Thanksgiving break. I know how Thanksgiving goes. You got a lot of relatives that want you to see you. You know, people come into town. If you're working and you got a job, you might be like really busy. Carter, I'm looking at you.
Yep.
Yeah, snow's gonna get real
40
busy.
hours
Yeah.
that week.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I have this before midnight 1 week from today, and then I have, and then I have it available until the 27th, which is Sunday night after Thanksgiving. It's right before we come back. So what I'm asking you guys is that timeline going to work out for you?
I don't know.
Well, if you haven't started, you have no idea of how long it's going to take. Any other questions about this assignment? Because this is like the big thing. This is your research. This is your presentation. This is your publication from this course. And hopefully you guys will do a good enough job that you'll want to keep this. And maybe use it as part of an application or something. By the way, somebody left on this computer when I came in. There was obviously a speech class taught in here. before we came in, and they had their PowerPoints. They were doing speech live, face-to-face talking. What I'm asking you to do is put it in a recording and make a video. But I'm not hearing anything from you guys, so is this okay? I get questions from people a lot on email or in my inbox here. And I'll answer questions for you. I'm trying to decide something else here too. And that is about maybe doing something else on Wednesday. So I've really been itching to go to that presentation by Rachel Miller, Holocaust survivor. It starts at 5 on Wednesday.
I remember you mentioning that last week.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if we didn't have class, maybe that would give you a little more time to work on this, if you would.
I feel like with the timeline, I can make it work, but not having that class would be
Helpful.
Mhm.
Good. What do you guys say to that? This is not a graded answer, you know. You can say you don't want it, that you could use the time differently.
Yeah, I
And-
could
Not
definitely
having
use.
class.
I could
Would be
definitely
good.
use more time.
Well, see, and here's what I'm looking at too. I just want to show you in that, here's the modules. And I had them set up here. I'll make sure I got the right screen share. Yeah, we're good. And that is that this is all the stuff we did, and this is what we just finished up here. And I was gonna do on today was gonna be was gonna do some Native American cultures and Japanese art. And then do Africa on Wednesday, the 16th. But I still want to do this. But I want to kind of show you some of this before we go today. And then you guys will be doing your presentations the Monday and Wednesday after Thanksgiving break. And we still have 2 more classes and we can wrap up. Then I can show you, finish up African art and talk about Native American art too, so I can budget that way.
I just find that for other classes that have take-home tests, when we don't have in-person class, one of the days it's helpful to use that time, so.
Well, I was thinking that too. And since this is kind of like the big thing here. 200 points. Okay, so we'll go with that. Did I hear a yay, nay? Okay,
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 Yeah, that works.
all right, good.
Yep.
All right. All right, so before we go today, I want to show you a little bit about African art. And I want to start with this. There's a map in the book and it says, it shows you Africa, and it basically shows you the whole continent of Africa and the modern day countries. Whoa, I'm radioactive. Never mind. But I wanted to kind of show you this. And it is a continent pre-colonial and many different cultures here. And what they have is the West African when I studied, I call it West Central African imperial system, and many kingdoms, many cultures, the Bantu states, which are pretty much in Southeast and South Africa. And then this other culture up here, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a very interesting, well, they're all interesting cultures, but Ethiopia shares a lot of history with the Arabian Peninsula, if you will. A lot of things go right across the Red Sea. It's just history. And up here, we have some other North African cultures, and this little pink, Ptolemaic Egypt, which is what we call the Greek Empire. When it ruled Egypt, it expanded all the way down here, and that was all the Ptolemy pharaohs were, among them were Cleopatra, for example, and it's when they built Alexandria up here at the Nile Delta and so on. And these cultures here largely say caliphates, Muslim cultures. And this is the Arabian Peninsula, the Umayyad Caliphate, and so on. But at any rate, this is really what you should know, not so much what's in the book. And so that being said, now I got to go all the way down here and talk to you about this. And if I can download it and show it to you. And I want to preface this by African art was something I studied in graduate school. As a matter of fact, I had a professor. Oh, I'll show you. I'll go back one. I had a professor there, was one of the great scholars on African art, and this is who he was. And he's passed away a couple of years ago. Jan Van Sina. And he's a pioneering figure in study Africa. Van Sina is considered one of the founders of the field of African history in the 1950s and 60s. And it was possible to study African history in the era prior to European contact. And as I was saying about China in the 19th century, a lot of Europeans started setting up shop, especially along the coast, kind of basically took over a lot of the port cities and came in and looted, to say it bluntly, a lot of the culture. Well, that happened in a big way in Africa too. But at any rate, he was the guy who really, he just spent his whole life studying this, and immense energy and commitment to scholarship and legacy of African history. So anyway, that was my guy. And I think let's take a look at this. I got some things embedded in this PowerPoint too. So anyway, Africa before 1800. As I was saying, Europeans came in. Europeans were there before this time, by the way. And as a matter of fact, they had been Portuguese and English and a lot of the other more nautical cultures of Europe, those on the Atlantic, had been coming around and trading in West Central Africa. But we take this before 1800 because that was really when this was colonization began. As I was saying, I wanted you to see the West Central empires, the Bantu cultures, and the Ethiopian Empire. This is the map that I had problems with because the little red titles here do indicate those pre-colonial empires, but this is a map of modern day Africa. And so I want to start with this Khan Academy video. If it'll let me play it, I will show it to you.
We're at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, talking about the golden stool. We're actually going to be looking at several different objects to make sense of this very important object that we don't have in a collection. It still exists in the Ashanti Nation in Ghana. It's incredibly important that the people that object remained in their possession, but that's a story we'll come back to. Let's talk about its origin. In the early 1700s, a man named Osei Tutu, an important king, was able to unify all the surrounding lands. He created the nation of the Ashanti people. The golden stool falls from the sky and lands in the lap of Osei Tutu. So this is a miracle, absolutely. And this is a wooden stool covered in gold, which was said to have been made in the heavens, said to be the soul of the Ashanti nation. So it takes on the essence of the entire group in the same way that we'll see a man's stool or a woman's stool can take on the essence of that person. So in a way, the stool is more important than any single king of the Ashanti people. It is far more sacred than the Ashanti Hini himself. And in fact, the golden stool is always given its own stool or its own chair on which to sit next to the Ashanti Hini, like we see in this picture. This is an area that is rich in gold, and the gold comes to symbolize royalty for the Ashanti. They were in charge of the gold trade through North Africa. This was long before Europeans were even there, but also gold is the color of royalty. So whether it's gold in the form of a textile color or it's the material of gold, it was reserved for royal use. So let's look at the objects in this case that relate to the trading of gold. We have a scale which shows how gold would have been weighed, and it would have been weighed with brass. So you would use these on one side of the scale and measure out the gold on the other so that you knew you were measuring the accurate amount of gold. What we find is a whole host of brass weights fashioned into very elaborate figures that depict almost every activity in every part of daily life. So it's a really wonderful way to learn about the Ashanti people. We see two here that show images of the Ashanti king. Both of these depict a group of figures gathered around central umbrella. That umbrella is really important because underneath it we know is the Ashanti king or an important chief. So the umbrella was a way that you could identify the king in a crowd. The king would also be wearing sandals, and we have a brass weight of just sandals depicted. And in that sense, we understand that the king is divine. In other words, he is seen as an intermediary between the everyday lives of his people and the supernatural realm. He's there to harness the good powers of the supernatural to help his people. He's between the heavens, below the umbrella, but he's above the earth, as he was by the sandals of the earth. So he's always sandwiched between the two. In one of these gold weights, we see the king surrounded by his retinue under an umbrella, being carried in a palanquin, and surrounding him are his sword bearers. Swords are very important symbols of rule, and they would have had gold handles. And then we see next to it another image of the king, this time with his wife, with the queen. Could be the queen mother, it could be his wife. There's an umbrella, and then two sword bearers in front of him. We also have other brass weights that just depict one figure, and these relate to particular proverbs or stories about virtues. And here we get at this important part about Ashanti modes of communication. That is that you don't speak directly. If you can, you let art speak for you, and you often speak in proverbs. Yeah, so each one of these have messages. If you understand this language, if you can decode it, you can know what the messages are.
So one of the ones in the case shows two crocodiles sharing one stomach.
And this double-headed crocodile has to do with the idea of family sharing a stomach. In other words, your connection, your essence, your belly is connected to your family. That's who nurtures you. So if you go off on your own, you're really not going to get very far in life.
And then we have a goat.
Or a ram with these curved horns. And one proverb states that rams move back before they charge. So the idea is that you have thoughtful contemplation, you move away from what you're about to do to make sure it's the right path.
So we're looking at these gold weights, and that brings us to another important part of the history of the Ashanti people, the continuing involvement of the British.
The British, certainly since the early 19th century, were interested in securing a way to control gold in this area. And they named this area the Gold Coast. The Ashanti obviously were not wanting to give up their control of this precious material, which had this royal significance.
And in 1874, the British destroyed the Ashanti capital, took lots back to England. Much of it remains from the British Museum collection today.
And one of the objects, of course, that they really wanted to get their hands on was the golden stool. They first exiled Pompey I. That was the Ashanti in the late 1800s.
The Ashanti people hid the golden stool.
The golden stool, which was obviously very important, in fact, more sacred than Pompey I himself, was in danger. And the British really tried hard to hunt it down.
British governor said, and I'm reading here from a record of what happened. He said, "Where is the golden stool? I am the representative of the paramount power. Why have you relegated me to this ordinary chair? Why did you not take the opportunity of my coming to bring the golden stool for me to sit upon?"
This was so offensive to the people of Ghana that a foreigner would come and demand their most precious and sacred object to sit on. This is not a stool anyone was allowed to sit on. In fact, it sat on its own stool. So Ya Asantewa, a queen mother, assembled all the soldiers she could find to fight against the British.
No, the Ashanti people were defeated, but the stool remained hidden.
The Ashanti were pretty successful in that they were allowed some autonomy. And by the 1920s, the British even agreed to allow Pompey I to return. And there was a promise made that the golden stool would not be taken and the golden stool was allowed to come out of hiding. Men and women are gifted stools by their parents when they come of age. And the idea of stools is really central, not just to kingship, but to everyday people. And this brass weight in this case is a replica of what a man or woman would sit on, but made of wood. So a man and woman's everyday stool used for things like sitting and socializing, sitting and eating, sitting and working, sounds very ordinary to us, but stools that one uses often take on their sunsun. Sunsun is a Ashanti concept, a traditional idea that your energy, it's like an aura that touches the things that you use a lot. So in order to keep your sunsun intact, when you leave the room, traditionally you would tip over your stool so that no one else would sit on it. They would know that was not intended for you. In that sense, the golden stool is also kept turned on its side, as we see in this photograph.
So the gold weight tells us something about the importance of stools in the Ashanti culture, but also about a personal energy that over the course of our lives, the objects that we use become imbued with.
That helps us to understand why the Ashanti people say the golden stool is the soul of the Ashanti nation.
Okay, let's get the right share. There we are. So you see a lot of similarities. You see some differences in cultures. Well, here's the golden stool. Oh, yeah, well, this is these things right here, they didn't talk about these so much.
Talking about the welds on the stool itself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's
They have a welding machine.
no, I think this was all done by casting, to be honest, it's cast gold. But it does look like that, and looks like, yeah, some of these spots kind of look like industrial. But this was, yeah. I think you're bringing up a good point here, though. And one of the things that you can tell by what we have, at least the artwork that they've left us, is you can tell their priorities. And there are a lot of things about like the people of what was called the Gold Coast, West Central Africa, and that's what Jan Van Sina really studied a lot and taught us. Those cultures, they had the technology to do things. And I'll show you, there's a lot of cast bronze and brass and gold objects. And so they had metallurgy, they had that down, they could do that. But what you don't see in this culture are a lot of like these big permanent buildings, at least in this part of, excuse me, this part of Africa, people didn't live that way. And so we don't see these great pyramids or large temples. We'll see them in other parts of the continent, but not so much here in West Central. And so anyway, the idea behind all that being, my point is that you find what's important, and there's an old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If what you have going for you works, there's no need to do other things. And so anyway, I wanted to point this out too. These represent the slain enemies, and here it is, the golden stool, and it has its own stool. And I wanted to show you this too, because this is really kind of an interesting photo, Omanhini, and look at this jewelry. This is all gold. And in fact, when the Europeans actually landed in, and they eventually colonized, like Sierra Leone was Portuguese, the British tried to colonize them. One of the things they were astounded by was how much gold they had in West Central Africa. And that then they got gold fever, and you know the rest. But bottom line, they could make this exquisite jewelry out of this. Look at this, just, oh, go to the previous. I'm trying to get this a little bit more out of the way. Maybe I can move it up. And so, but the textiles and the colors and this is all done through weaving. This is the colors, the dyes, everything. It's pretty much all done by artisans. And I wanted to show you this. You see this on this side here. It's kind of hard to make out, but it's gold, and then it has some textile rope here. And up here, you can't even tell what it is, but it is something we've seen. We saw this in South Asia, a fly whisk. So when the flies get by, you just kind of shoo them away. And this picture is what's on the front of this book, the Ashanti. And this was one of the textbooks in my African art class. And I wanted to show you this too. I'm going to zoom in because this is like so telling. Back in my day, this is $6.95, but a pound was worth about $1.50 then. So for like $10, that's what I paid for textbooks. College was a bargain. Just say it. And so, this is a little excerpt from the text. And I thought this described this whole relationship quite well. It said in Africa, the relationships between leaders and art forms are strong, complex, and universal. Political, spiritual, and social leaders, kings, chiefs, titled people, and religious specialists have the power and wealth to obtain the services of the best artists and acquire the most costly materials to adorn themselves. And then you had see the figures, furnish their homes and palaces and make visible the cultural and religious organizations they lead. Leaders also possess the power to dispense artworks or the right to own and display them. And I thought that's African culture, and that really explains a lot. But in a lot of ways, that's kind of what we've been seeing for the whole time. And when I ask you on your PowerPoint presentations, power structures, this is what we're talking about. Kings, titled people, religion, etc. These are the people in the African cultures that get to decide what the art is. They're the ones that can afford these expensive artists, and that's why artists, at least back in the day, they would be pretty well to do. They had skills that were valuable. Not any different in Africa or India or Europe, Asia, anywhere. It was a good thing to be an artist. And so this is how it was. And this is this whole course pre-1400. Because what happens after 1400 is that it kind of flattens out a little bit. More people start making money. We have an emergence of a middle class. We have proliferation of art. We have today a lot of artists are employed by corporations and ad agencies and movie makers and all kinds of things, not necessarily the religious titled monarchies. It's like broad now, and you guys who are studying art, you can be doing a dozen, 2 dozen, 5, maybe million different things. You could be an interior decorator. You could be doing comic strips. You could be working, doing TikTok videos for whatever. I mean, you know, art has really flattened out, but in this case, and in most of what we've seen, the art was at the pleasure of these leaders that possess the power. And so anyway, this is from Benin, Nigeria, and it's kind of late here. It's a 1550, 1680. This is cast bronze, or brass rather. And you see it's in New York. And what we have here is a really good characterization, a really good portrait of the king. And in this case, he's not having a helmet, but he does have here, he has here his entourage, his family. He's seated on, in what we just saw with the Shante culture, a stool. And that's how they did it in West Central Africa, but the stool was portable. And so if you went from one village to the other, you could bring your stool with you. And it was designed especially for you. And if you were the king of the Ashanti, you had the golden stool. And it marked your status. But we see that in other cultures, and typically it's not a stool, it's a throne. And the throne is fixed and it's in a building, but that's not the lifestyle in West Central Africa. People move around. We don't have the big permanent fortresses, at least in this part of the world. And so anyway, you can tell how they adorn themselves. And you see this necklace here of seashells, very popular. These rings, this is very it's very common. It's common ornamentation, it's common jewelry in West Central Africa, rings. And if you're high up, they're gold rings around your neck, and the headdress. And there's a lot we don't have in terms of art that existed, we know existed, but we don't have it. Couple of things. One is that most of your artistic creations, many were in textiles. Textiles don't last forever. It's art made to be worn and wears out. It's biodegradable. It doesn't last. Wood, for example, we got some wood stools. But wood is another biodegradable. It's not stone. It's not metal. We got artifacts that were made from brass and bronze. It's hard to find, especially in that climate, artifacts that go back. And so another part of that is gold. I showed you the gold jewelry, gold, tremendous, valuable, had plenty of it. But if you know anything about gold, you know that it's easy to melt it down and to make other stuff out of it. It's very malleable, as they say. But there are a few things that go back very far. And this is one of them. Namibia. Apollo 11 cave. Now, what's that all about? Apollo 11 cave. Let me tell you, there were archaeologists exploring in South Africa, and they were at this cave and they found this artifact. It's in two pieces, but it's a drawing. It's done in charcoal, and they figured out that it's 28,000 years old. 30,000 you add the two common era centuries. And so bottom line, this rivals what we studied in the beginning of this class. The caves at Lascaux, Altamira, and so on. We saw cave art, first thing. But this actually goes back farther than most of the things that we saw in Europe. And so it's another thing I want to point out. Feline with human feet. And you see that there? Have we seen that before? We've seen that many times, not so much that it's a cat with human feet, but there are humans with animal characteristics and there are animals with human characteristics. We've seen that. This is across humanity. And why do they call it the Apollo 11 cave? Well, they found this in July 1969. And what was happening then? Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin landing on the moon. It was the Apollo 11 mission. And that marked kind of a turning point, a very significant moment in human history where people went beyond Earth and they were walking on another celestial body, the moon. And so anyway, they named this cave and this discovery after that. And so North Africa, running woman, rock painting, Algeria. So we know art goes back thousands of years in various parts of Africa. And a lot of things very similar. Terracotta, paint, charcoal, brass, textiles. So anyway, I got a few more things to say, but we're running out of time, which means I'm gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to until after the Thanksgiving break. But when we come back from Thanksgiving, I'll expect to have all of your PowerPoints, and that's what we're gonna look at right off the bat. You guys will be teaching each other and teaching me. And so, any questions?
So just to be clear, we don't have class on Wednesday.
That is correct. No class Wednesday. You guys talked me into it. I tried, but you know, my arm is still sore from all of the twisting, but no, it's all good with me too. It's a time where we're pretty caught up. You guys need some time. I'm good with that. I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing your PowerPoint. So have a good one.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes. Themes, topics, and
So like, could I do,
subjects.
yeah, so we're going to get, like sculptures of people. So I could I do like 4 different sculptures from really friends from places, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes,
So it's like
absolutely,
a-
because there will be much similarity,
Yeah,
but there'll be stylistic differences, and there may be some differences in religion, mores, ideology. Like, for instance, you'll see Greek. See ya. You'll see some cultures be more modest. Some will be okay with depicting nude figures, you know, stuff like that.
yeah, okay, so like that,
That's a good subject.
okay, all right.
Good, and you get my message about getting the paper.
Oh, for my.
Yes.
thing, so it's, it's, I think it's been approved by the school,
Good.
so they,
Yeah, stay on that, because
Yeah.
that's like hugely important.
yeah, no, I know, cause I have the paperwork for it, but you said that the school would be presented to us like that.
Yeah, yeah, and they will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
once I think it's fully approved by them. it's like that.
Yeah, and that should follow you for all of your classes for the rest of the time. The instructor will
Yeah,
get a letter,
yeah,
and you'll be set.
okay, all right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, have a good break.
Hey, yeah, you too.
Austin, how you doing? Good, how are you? Good.
Is there with?
What?
So no class on Wednesdays?
No class Sundays. That's correct.
Perfect.
I know, I like seeing you guys here, but yeah. But anyway, enjoy the break.
So the only time we're gonna see each other's after Thanksgiving.
That is correct.
Perfect.
I'm glad you asked, though.
I had to make
And
sure
I don't want you to come in here and say,
that no one is here.
yeah.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
All right, you too. Botswana, we love it.